She was invisible. Just another waitress nobody looked at twice. But when the billionaire tried to mock her in a foreign language, she did something that made the entire restaurant go silent and cost him everything. You need to hear this. Welcome to the story room. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes we become invisible without even realizing it. That's what happened to Grace Turner. She worked at the Golden Terrace, one of those fancy restaurants in downtown Chicago where every table costs more than most people make in a week. Grace wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. 3 years ago, she was living a completely different life. She was studying languages at Oxford University in England. Can you imagine? She spoke 7 languages fluently and was writing research papers that professors twice her age couldn't understand. She had scholarships, awards, a future so bright it hurt to look at. But then her mother got sick. Cancer. The bills started piling up like snowdrifts in winter. Grace dropped everything, flew home, and never went back. Oxford became a memory. Her dreams got packed away in a box she couldn't bear to open. Now she carried plates, smiled when she didn't feel like smiling, apologized for things that weren't her fault. And most nights, she walked home with aching feet and an aching heart, wondering if anyone even saw her anymore. It was a Thursday night. The restaurant was packed with the usual crowd, expensive suits, designer dresses, laughter that sounded like money. Grace was working table 12, trying to stay invisible like she always did. That's when Brandon West walked in. If you don't know the name, just know this. Brandon West owned half the tech startups in the city. He was the kind of rich that made other rich people feel poor. And he had a reputation, not a good one. He loved making people feel small. It made him feel big. He sat down with his girlfriend, a woman who looked uncomfortable just being near him. And then Brandon saw Grace. Something in his eyes shifted. He had found his entertainment for the evening. He started ordering in what he thought was Italian. But it wasn't Italian. It was gibberish mixed with hand gestures and a fake accent that would have been funny if it wasn't so cruel. His girlfriend laughed nervously. Other tables started watching. You understand me, right? Brandon said loudly, looking around to make sure everyone was paying attention. Or, do I need to speak slower? He dragged out the word, mocking her. Grace stood there, holding her notepad. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her. This was the moment. The moment she was supposed to shrink, to apologize, to disappear even more than she already had. But something inside her snapped. Before the story continues, subscribe. These stories are written to change lives. Grace looked Brandon West directly in the eyes. And then she spoke. Not in English. In perfect, flawless Italian. The kind of Italian you only learn by living in Rome, by studying Dante, by loving the language enough to master every subtle rhythm. She didn't just translate his order. She corrected him. Gently. Professionally. She pointed out that what he'd said actually meant something completely different and slightly embarrassing. Then she recommended a wine pairing in Italian so smooth, so effortless, that the actual Italian chef came out of the kitchen just to listen. The restaurant went dead silent. You could hear silverware touching plates. Someone's phone buzzing. Nothing else. Brandon's face turned red. Then purple. His girlfriend stared at Grace like she'd just witnessed a magic trick. Other diners started whispering, some even smiling. And that's when Brandon West did what bullies always do when they're exposed. He attacked. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This woman, he shouted, pointing at Grace, just stole my wallet. I want the police called right now. Right now. The whispers turned to gasps. Grace felt her heart sink. It didn't matter that she hadn't done anything. In a place like this, power spoke louder than truth. And Brandon West had all the power. Or so everyone thought. From a quiet table in the corner, an older man stood up. He wasn't loud. He didn't shout. But somehow, everyone turned to look at him anyway. There was something about the way he carried himself, calm, certain, kind. His name was Thomas Brightwell. And if you knew anything about business in America, you knew that name. Thomas Brightwell had built libraries in 30 countries. His foundation funded hospitals, schools, research programs. He didn't just have money. He had respect. "Excuse me," Thomas said, his voice gentle but firm. "Before we call anyone, perhaps you should check your coat pocket, young man." Brandon froze. His hand moved to his jacket, fumbling through the pockets. And there it was. His wallet, right where he'd left it. The restaurant erupted. Not with noise, but with a feeling. You could feel the shift, the justice of the moment settling over everyone like a warm blanket on a cold night. Brandon tried to stammer out an explanation, but Thomas wasn't done. He walked over slowly, standing between Brandon and Grace like a shield. "I recognize you," Thomas said, looking at Grace now. "Oxford, wasn't it? 3 years ago. You were doing research on linguistic preservation in endangered communities. I was supposed to present you with the Chamberlain Fellowship." Grace's eyes filled with tears. Someone remembered. Someone saw her. Thomas turned back to Brandon. "I also recognize you, Mr. West. Your company has been seeking investment from my foundation for months. Consider that request permanently denied." He said it so simply, so quietly, but everyone in that restaurant knew what it meant. Brandon West had just lost millions. His reputation had just shattered, all because he couldn't resist being cruel to someone he thought didn't matter. Brandon left without another word. His girlfriend stayed behind and apologized to Grace before leaving separately. 3 months later, Grace wasn't carrying plates anymore. She was sitting in a bright office overlooking Lake Michigan. Thomas Brightwell had offered her a position as the director of cultural programs for his foundation. The salary was enough to pay off every medical bill. Her mother had the best care money could buy and was in remission. But more than that, more than the money, more than the title, Grace had something she thought she'd lost forever. She had her voice back. Her mother visited the office one afternoon, walking on her own for the first time in a year. She looked around at everything Grace had built in such a short time. The programs, the partnerships with universities, the scholarships for students who had to choose between their dreams and their families. "I'm so proud of you," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. Grace smiled. Not the smile she used to give at the restaurant, the one that said, "I'm fine," when she wasn't. A real smile, one that reached her eyes. Because here's the truth, Brandon West still has his money. He still has his tech companies. But Grace? Grace got something better. She got herself back. And now she's spending every single day making sure that no one else has to choose between being seen and surviving. Sometimes the people we ignore are the ones with the most to say. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to remind the world that invisible doesn't mean powerless. Thanks for your watching. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to the Story Room for meaningful stories that inspire and teach life lessons. And follow for the part 2.